I blame Rene Descartes for why fashion and sustainability is broken. You're probably wondering why a philosopher who lived in the 1600s is to blame for a 21st century problem. So let me explain. The push for fashion to reach net zero by 2050 seems like a pipe dream right now. According to some studies, the industry needs about $1 trillion to meet the necessary sustainable goals it set out. And the problem is, when times get tough, the industry goes into short-term survival mode and long-term issues, such as sustainability, fall by the wayside. We live in a world driven by capitalism, but unfortunately the link between sustainability and making money is weak at best. So I'm going to try to present a better case today, at least in part. In order to understand the root cause, we need to understand history. The earliest record I could find of associated issues related to workers' rights and waste in fashion dates back to the 1840s, right here in the UK, during the rise of mass production. While some people attribute mass production to the invention of mechanization in manufacturing, it was actually a little bit before that. The rise of mass production was triggered by the fashion industry's standardization of sizing. Apart from military uniforms, one of the first products to be mass-produced was the smock. It's what people wore when working in farms. But soon afterward, it led to a size standardization and mass production of other types of garments. E. Moses and Son of Aldgate were one of the best-known ready-made clothing retailers in the mid-1800s. Ready-made garments during the Industrial Revolution was everything. The demand was too much to keep up with. But it had its downsides. With standardizing sizes and ready-made stock came financial risk. You were betting on people buying those clothes, but consumers were fickle and unpredictable. So unsurprisingly, E. Moses and Son of Aldgate were the largest advertising spenders in the UK, trying to drive consumer demand with marketing campaigns. However, all this cost of advertising and the risk of not selling out resulted in retailers and brands to cut workers' wages and put downward pressure on the cost of production. In the mid to late 1900s, the world was moving towards globalization, from overt colonization to soft power through trade. To be honest, it was just colonization masquerading as business partnership, but that's a conversation for another time. Shipping advancements and air freighting led to the rise of offshore production, resulting in immensely complex supply chains. In fact, the supply chains were so complex, it led to brands setting up sourcing offices and hiring sourcing agents overseas just to manage it. Each of these were, of course, additional operational costs for the brand, so they had to find places to cut costs. Where from, you might ask? Production. And the single biggest cost in production? Workers' wages. One of the first to really make the most of this global supply chain and arbitrage of low-cost production was none other than Nike. We all know about Nike's incredible marketing prowess, but some of us overlook its use of the global supply chain to compete with its biggest rivals, Adidas. Now, I'm not against globalization. It certainly has its benefits. But I'm against how fragmentation of the supply chain has led to suboptimal decisions across the entire industry. Since E. Moses and Son of Aldgate to the present, brands have had a single metric they're optimizing for: cost. Yes, that's the basic of business operations, you might say, but there's no such thing as free lunch. At some point, the costs you cut on one side of the equation appear tenfold on the other side. So we need to balance that equation, strike an equilibrium of sorts. Over the years, the fashion industry has continued to drive costs down, searching for the next cheapest location to manufacture and offset that operational cost built up because of their complex supply chain, moving from Japan to Korea to Taiwan to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and the list goes on. With such low costs, you might suspect, well, at least the brands are making a ton of money, right? Wrong. As of late, you've probably seen a number of different brands declaring bankruptcy, reporting losses, falls in profit. Turns out, just like in the 1840s, holding stock is hard. People are unpredictable, even more unpredictable than the 1840s. In the Victorian era, trends changed once every 7 years or so. Now, well, I don't even know, maybe 7 weeks? Predicting consumer behavior across long time horizons is mathematically intractable, yes, even for AI. But that didn't stop brands from developing a science around this ever so difficult problem. A science built upon suboptimal operational model, resulting in unpredictable outcomes. Sort of how economists build models assuming 0% interest rates and perfect information. Great in theory, but almost useless in reality. From multi-year strategic planning to annual planning, seasonal planning, monthly planning, either based on pure bullshit or bullshit masquerading as AI and data. The truth is, for most products, it's difficult to know what you'll sell, how much you'll sell, and when you'll sell it. Whilst you do need to do some sort of planning, the planning needs to account for the realities on the ground and have an accurate view of externalities. This problem is only amplified because of the complex supply chains, which require planners to commit to inventory sometimes a year in advance. As someone who spent their entire career building AI models, even AI can't tell you whether consumers will buy cheetah print next year, and the net result of these approaches, depressed margins at best, or bankruptcy at worst, not to mention sustainability issues across waste and workers' rights. The existing operating models for the fashion industry based on lowest cost production have led to the ability of fashion brands to adopt sustainability at scale feel like an impossibility. The current way of working means brands don't own their manufacturing facilities, which is where most of the investments for sustainability are needed, from materials to renewable energy to workers' rights. Pressuring the manufacturers to get in line highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of the real problem. Most manufacturers, even the larger ones, are unable to access the necessary capital needed to transform their factory and processes to net zero. At the end of the day, the problem with sustainability is rooted in capital. Furthermore, even if you are able to adopt sustainable materials, the existing ways of working would result in excess raw materials and finished product, leading to yet again a cash challenge. In fact, unsold inventory is likely the largest contributor to fashion sustainability problem, and one that is built in to the operating model in the industry developed over the last 2 centuries. So where will the $1 trillion needed to transform the fashion industry come from? It most certainly won't come from cutting costs on the production side, but rather by adopting a different way of working. A way of working that doesn't rely upon offsetting inventory risk with lowest cost and large sourcing offices. A way of working that acknowledges that the future is uncertain, and one that understands the unseen costs on the other side of the equation, post-production, costs like markdown and interest payments on finished goods. With technology today, there's no reason why brands can't adopt more agile approaches from design all the way to production with direct links into the manufacturer. The only thing holding them back today is the deeply ingrained culture dating back to the 1840s. Brands that are able to adopt these approaches, by my calculations, can improve their gross margin by 15%, more than enough to contribute towards the essential shift needed towards sustainability. The net impact of agile production approaches not only benefit from a profit perspective and waste perspective, but also has cash flow uplifts, which ultimately result in cheaper access to capital. The same capital needed to truly achieve sustainable transformation. So, going back full circle, why do I blame René Descartes? Well, Descartes is one of the key visionaries behind reductionism, a philosophical idea that says you can understand a complex system by simply focusing on its individual parts. In one way, he was right. It led to hyper-specialization of jobs, which resulted in efficiency and economic growth. But somewhere along that process, something was lost. A holistic view of how those parts connected. The fashion industry has embraced reductionism, creating divisions that focus on each individual part of the value chain without understanding how those parts affect the next part of the value chain. Most designers have no understanding how a color change or a fabric swap impacts their holistic cost. Not only financial cost, but also environmental and societal cost. In the end, due to this reductionist mindset, we have lost sight of not only the potential solution, but actually what the real problem is. The future of fashion needs to break the silos and adopt a holistic approach, one where the future impacts of decisions can be understood at the point where you're making that decision. And guess what? That's also where AI can truly thrive.